They say family and business don't mix. I never believed that. Until the day my brother fired me. My name is Lily Maddox, and for the past 12 years, I was the director of operations at Maddox Company, a third-generation logistics company our grandfather started with a single delivery truck in 1958. My office wasn't flashy. No floor-to-ceiling windows or leather chairs. But from that modest space, I kept our warehouses humming, our contracts on schedule, and our staff supported. Then my older brother, Darren, was named CEO. It was a quiet Thursday morning when he summoned me to the boardroom. The air was heavy with new energy. Fake smiles, tighter suits, and that consultant from McCallum Strategies who kept calling me old school behind closed doors. Darren stood at the head of the table, flanked by 2 board members and 1 legal advisor. "Lily," he began, not meeting my eyes, "you've done good work here. But the company is entering a new phase. We need leadership that reflects our future, not our past." I blinked. "Is this a restructuring conversation?" "It's a termination conversation," he said flatly. "Effective immediately. You're no longer needed here, little sister." The words didn't register at first. I looked around, expecting someone to speak up, to object. No one did. "After everything," I started, my voice cracking before I could stop it. 12 years, Darren. I built this company with you." He shrugged. "You did your part. Now let the professionals take over." He slid a folder toward me. Severance package, NDA, non-compete clause. All pre-signed. I closed the folder slowly and stood. "What about the vendor transition plans? The international licensing agreement? The Portwell contract?" "We'll manage," he said, his tone dismissive. That word echoed in my head like a hammer strike. Manage. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I picked up the photo of our grandfather on my desk, him standing in front of his first truck in a worn jacket, grinning, and walked out. That afternoon, as I packed my things, Amanda from accounting knocked gently on my door. She didn't say much, just stood there and mouthed, "I'm sorry." I nodded, but inside something had shifted. Not grief, not even anger. It was clarity. Darren thought I was replaceable. What he didn't know, what he hadn't cared to learn, was that for the past 18 months, I'd been working closely with our largest vendor, SwiftLink Logistics, to develop a proprietary scheduling system that saved them nearly $3 million in annual shipping errors. That contract wasn't with Maddox Company. It was with me. See, our grandfather always said, "Don't just build your name. Build your leverage." It was advice I took to heart. While Darren was busy whining and dining investors, I was in the trenches building real relationships, ones that mattered. When I left the building that day, I didn't just walk away from a job. I walked into an opportunity Darren never saw coming. The next morning, I met with Marcus Ellington, the CEO of SwiftLink. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a sympathetic smile. "He really fired you?" "Didn't even flinch," I said. "But I have a proposal." 3 days later, Maddox Company's biggest vendor sent an unexpected notice of contract termination, citing misalignment of operational values. Friday morning, 9:14 a.m., Darren called their office in a panic. He didn't get Marcus. He got me. "Hello?" he barked, clearly expecting someone else. "This is Lily Maddox," I said evenly, "the new CEO of Ellington Maddox Logistics." Silence. "I believe you were calling about your canceled shipments?" For a man who always loved the sound of his own voice, Darren was shockingly quiet. I could almost hear his thoughts racing through the phone, trying to piece it all together. Ellington Maddox Logistics. My voice on the other end. His top vendor now answering to me. I think there's been some confusion," he stammered finally. "I was calling Marcus." "Marcus retired last week," I said calmly. "I bought his stake in the company. We've restructured." "You?" His voice climbed with disbelief. "You're running SwiftLink now?" "Ellington Maddox Logistics," I corrected. "And yes, you fired me, Darren. I had some free time. I let the silence stretch, savoring the weight of his panic. "This is ridiculous," he said. "We have a contract." "You did," I said. "That contract expired last quarter. You never renewed it. Marcus offered. You ignored. You were too busy bringing in those McCallum consultants." I could practically hear the color draining from his face. "But, look, we've got shipments scheduled, routes planned. We can't just... You can't just fire the person holding your supply chain together," I said, my voice flat now. "But you did." I ended the call before he could respond. The next few days were chaos for Maddox and Company. I didn't need insider access to see it. I still had friends inside, people loyal to the company, if not to my brother. They called, they texted, they vented. Warehouse 4 ran out of containers. Drivers sat idle without manifests. 2 international clients received wrong shipments and began preparing penalty claims. And still, Darren refused to call me again. Instead, he scrambled to find a replacement vendor. But here's the thing about relationships. They're built on time, trust, and consistency, not quick deals made out of desperation. He called Freight North, then Transjet, then Ocean Path. Each gave him the same answer: no capacity. It wasn't personal. It was just business. Or so it seemed. The truth was, I'd quietly built a new coalition. 5 logistics companies who were tired of Darren's dismissiveness, his short tempers, and his broken promises. Together, we shared routes, staff, and most importantly, information. Darren hadn't just lost a vendor. He'd lost access. My father called that Friday evening, first time since the firing. "I don't want to get in the middle of this," he said, "but your brother is under pressure." "I'm aware," I said. "He's not sleeping. The board's questioning him. We've lost 3 major contracts this week." "I know," I said again. He was quiet for a moment. "Lily, you always said you didn't want the spotlight." "I still don't." "Then why are you doing this?" I sighed. "I'm not sabotaging Darren. I'm protecting what matters. People, clients, reputation. He left those things in my hands for 12 years and never learned how to hold them himself." My father didn't reply. Not because he disagreed, but because he knew I was right. 3 days later, I walked into a meeting room at the Ellington Maddox headquarters, a modest space near the Boston Harbor where everything smelled like fresh paint and possibility. My assistant, Nina, handed me a folder. "Update on the vendor expansion plan," she said. "Also, 3 of your former warehouse managers are asking to join us. They've already resigned." I opened the folder slowly. Inside were applications, resumes, and handwritten notes from people I'd trained, coached, and believed in. People Darren had sidelined or overlooked. "You think they're ready?" I asked. Nina smiled. "They said, 'Wherever Lily goes, we go.'" It wasn't revenge, I felt. It was something steadier, stronger, momentum. That week, Maddox and Company's stock dipped 7% after a supply chain analyst flagged significant disruptions in their vendor operations. Industry newsletters picked up the story. They speculated about instability, mismanagement, rumors of layoffs. And then came the Whisper Network. Lily Maddox didn't disappear. She's back. And she's building something. I never confirmed anything. I didn't need to. People saw the writing on the wall. Darren, meanwhile, doubled down. Publicly, he insisted things were fine. Internally, he cut costs, slashed hours, and pressured departments to do more with less. Morale collapsed. Turnover spiked. He didn't understand that the backbone of a business isn't its tech, its offices, or its branding consultants. It's people. And people remember how you treat them. On a quiet Saturday morning, I returned to our grandfather's gravesite. It had been 5 years since my last visit. I brought coffee and sat on the old bench beneath the oak tree he used to love. "I know this isn't how you wanted the company to be," I said softly, "but I'm trying." The wind rustled the leaves gently, and I imagined him smiling with that crooked grin of his, the one that meant keep going. I pulled out my phone and opened a spreadsheet. Numbers, routes, margins, all of it humming like a song I knew by heart. One by one, the pieces were coming together. And Darren hadn't even noticed the storm was just beginning. Darren had always been a showman. Even when we were kids, he'd line up our cousins in the backyard and announce himself as captain before assigning chores like they were combat missions. He loved attention, craved admiration, and as CEO, he assumed the same instincts would keep him safe. But business isn't a talent show, and the spotlight can turn cruel when results don't follow the performance. By mid-month, cracks in Darren's leadership were no longer rumors. They were reality. His flashy new consultants from McCallum Strategies had promised efficiency and scalability. Instead, they'd slashed frontline staff, renegotiated supplier terms without understanding the service demands, and replaced key warehouse systems with a platform no one could operate without a week-long training session. Deliveries were late. Clients were furious. And internally, employees were starting to whisper what no one had dared to say aloud. Maybe Lily was the one actually running things. It was a Tuesday morning when I got a call from Vanessa, one of the board members I hadn't spoken to since my firing. "I hope you don't mind me reaching out," she said cautiously. "Not at all," I replied, curious. "Is it true?" she asked. "About you and Ellington Maddox?" I didn't answer directly. "Why are you asking?" She sighed. "Because we have a problem. Darren briefed us last night. Our 4 largest clients are threatening to leave. He blamed vendor issues, but those issues started after he fired the person managing those relationships." I finished for her. "Exactly." There was a pause. "Would you ever consider returning to Maddox & Company?" I didn't hesitate. "No." Another pause. "Not even in a leadership role?" "I'm not interested in cleaning up someone else's mess," I said gently, especially when I warned them not to make it in the first place. She didn't argue. "I thought you should know. There's a special board session Friday. Performance review. It's not going to be pretty." I thanked her and hung up, my thoughts already racing. Darren wouldn't see it coming. And that was the problem. That afternoon, I sat down with my legal advisor, Eva Chen, at a quiet downtown cafe. I'd brought a thick folder of documents, partnership agreements, growth projections, and client feedback. "I want to make sure we're protected," I told her. "This isn't just about competition anymore. It's about legacy." Eva flipped through the pages, nodding. "These contracts are rock solid. You're not just growing, you're becoming the alternative." "That's the idea." She glanced up. "You do know Darren might try to sue, right? For interference, IP theft, whatever he can come up with." I smiled faintly. "Let him try. I didn't take a single client. They came to me." And that was true. I hadn't poached. I hadn't whispered behind doors. I'd simply stood still while everything Darren built began to crumble under its own weight. Meanwhile, inside Maddox & Company, things were unraveling faster than the PR team could spin. A photo surfaced on LinkedIn of me shaking hands with the COO of Carrington and Ellis, our former largest client. The caption, "New partnerships, new possibilities." Within hours, industry forums exploded. Darren's leadership was called reckless. Maddox & Company was labeled unstable. And suddenly, a quiet wave of resignations swept through the company. Middle managers, drivers, logistics coordinators, the people who made things work. Most of them came to me. That Friday, Darren stood before the board. 10 people who had once praised his vision. Now they wanted explanations. He opened with a rehearsed speech about temporary disruptions and agile pivots. But the numbers didn't lie. Net revenue had dropped 14% in 6 weeks. Client retention was spiraling. Internal surveys showed employee satisfaction had hit an all-time low. Then came the final blow. Vanessa passed around a report compiled by a third-party analyst. It showed that under Darren's leadership, Maddox Company had lost 38% of its operational value due to failed integrations, vendor instability, and executive mismanagement. Darren tried to shift the blame on me, on old systems, on the market, but the board had stopped listening. That evening, he did something I never expected. He showed up at my condo. I opened the door to find him on my doorstep, shoulders tense, tie loosened, eyes rimmed with fatigue. "I need to talk," he said. I stepped aside. He paced the living room like a caged animal. "Do you know what they said in that meeting? They think I've ruined everything." I sat quietly, let him rant. "Do you know what it's like to be told you're not good enough? That you're just a placeholder until someone better comes along?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," I said softly. "I do." He froze. I stood. "You didn't just fire your sister, Darren. You fired the only person who ever told you the truth. And now you're standing on a throne built from sand." He didn't argue. He just nodded, defeated, and then he left. The Monday after Darren showed up at my condo, the board of Maddox Company called an emergency vote. I wasn't there, of course. I hadn't set foot in that building since the day he fired me. But I heard what happened. Vanessa later told me that Darren had come in looking haggard, his voice low, his presentation shorter than usual. For the first time since becoming CEO, he had no graphs, no slogans, no ambitious projections. Just excuses. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it didn't need to be. 5 out of 9 members approved a motion to strip him of executive authority, pending a full performance audit. The words were formal, clinical, but everyone knew what it meant. Darren was CEO in name only. His power had been reduced to figurehead status, effective immediately. But what came next surprised everyone. The board didn't appoint a replacement from within. They sent me an invitation. I opened the email at my kitchen table, coffee in hand, sun pouring through the window like everything was suddenly brighter. "We would like to invite you to a private meeting to discuss strategic options for Maddox Company moving forward. Your perspective is vital." Vital. 12 years of unseen effort, of early mornings and quiet successes. And now, vital. I stared at the screen for a long time before closing my laptop. That night, I took a walk through our old distribution lot in Everett. The place had been a second home to me once. I could still name every crew chief and which loading bay always stuck during winter. I remembered sitting on the edge of Dock 3 with my grandfather, him sipping tea from a thermos while explaining how to spot a weak link in a supply chain. It's not the slowest part, Lily. It's the part no one's watching. That's what breaks first. The company had become exactly that, a machine with no one watching the important parts. Now the board wanted me to fix it. But I wasn't sure I wanted to. At the meeting the next day, they gave me the seat opposite the head of the table. Darren's old spot. He wasn't there. "Thank you for coming," Vanessa began. The others nodded, some with awkward smiles, others avoiding eye contact. "We need your insight," said Gregory, a senior board member who once called me just logistics. I looked around at the faces of people who had watched me get pushed out, who said nothing as my brother erased me from the company my family built. "You're in a difficult position," I said finally, "and I understand that. But I'm not here to take over. I've built something of my own now, something I believe in." A ripple of disappointment moved across the room. "But I will help," I added, lifting my eyes to meet theirs. "On one condition." Vanessa leaned forward. "What's that?" "I want full access to the financials, vendor agreements, staffing reports. Everything. No more secrets, no more politics. If you want me to help stabilize this company, then I need to know exactly how broken it is." They agreed unanimously. And just like that, I became the invisible CEO. No title, no press release, just the real work. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. A major client had filed a breach of contract suit. Several supplier contracts were set to auto-renew with inflated pricing clauses Darren never read. 3 warehouses were understaffed, and one hadn't been inspected in months. But what hurt the most were the internal emails I found, ones between Darren and the McCallum consultants. "She's too soft to lead," one had written. "Too emotional. She gets too close to the staff." Too emotional. The phrase stuck with me, like compassion was a flaw, like knowing your employees' kids' names made you weak. They didn't understand. People stay for leaders who care. And now, most of those people were with me at Ellington Maddox. One night, I called Miguel, my former warehouse lead from our Brooklyn facility. He now ran one of my new depots with a level of loyalty you couldn't buy. "Do you think we could support a temporary supply boost?" I asked. He didn't even hesitate. "For Maddox?" "Yes, but they don't know it's from us." He laughed. "You really are your grandfather's granddaughter." We rerouted inventory, quietly covered routes, sent backup trucks to clients still under Maddox's banner. No press, no signatures, just help. Sometimes revenge wasn't loud. Sometimes it was kindness withheld, then returned on your own terms. A week later, I received a message from Darren. "Thank you. I know it was you." Just 7 words. No apology, no justification, but maybe, just maybe, a sliver of understanding. I didn't reply. Some things didn't need words. The foundation was still cracked. But it was holding, and I was done being the silent backbone. Now I was the architect. The board scheduled its final vote on Darren's position for a Friday morning. I wasn't invited officially, but Vanessa had already texted, "Please be nearby," just in case. By then, I'd reviewed every document, every vendor contract, every policy Darren had altered, neglected, or flat out ignored. What I found painted a clear picture, not of a villain, but of a man out of his depth. He hadn't meant to destroy Maddox and company. He'd just been too proud to admit he wasn't qualified to lead it. Still, intent didn't erase damage. That morning, I sat across the street in a small cafe with my laptop open and my phone silent, sipping tea and watching the glass-fronted office building that had once been my second home. It felt like watching an old friend undergo surgery. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was tense. Vanessa later told me Darren had walked in dressed to win. Dark suit, crisp tie, all confidence. He brought a slideshow, charts, projections, even a revised business plan. The problem? It was too late. The numbers were in. The clients were gone. And the trust? Shattered. What none of them expected, though, was Darren's final move. "I've secured a private investor," he announced as he clicked to the last slide. "Willing to inject $4.2 million in exchange for a minority stake and a seat on the board." That got their attention. Gregory leaned forward. "Who's the investor?" Darren hesitated. "I'm not at liberty to name them until the vote is complete." And that was his mistake. The board smelled the bluff immediately. It was a desperate play, one designed to make them hesitate. But the board didn't need hesitation. They needed leadership. And Darren, no matter how well-dressed, no longer inspired confidence. The vote was called. 7 votes, 6 to remove him. 1 abstention. Vanessa. She told me later, "I didn't vote because I didn't want to be the one to push him over the edge, but I also didn't want to save him." Darren was officially out. 2 hours later, I got a call from the board chair. "We've appointed an interim leadership committee, but we'd like to bring you in. Formally this time." "Under what terms?" I asked. "We're open to negotiation." I closed my laptop and exhaled. The moment I had imagined for weeks was here. The company that cast me out now wanted me to return and rebuild what Darren broke. But I wasn't the same person they fired. I'd built something better, more agile, more personal, and more respected. Ellington Maddox wasn't just successful. It was admired. So I asked for something bold. "I want joint ownership," I said. "A controlling interest in Maddox and Company equal to the board's total. You want me to rebuild the company? I want to own the foundation this time." There was silence. I'll bring over my team, offer client stability, reestablish vendor trust, and restore our reputation, I continued. But I don't report to anyone who once stayed silent when I was pushed out. To my surprise, they didn't reject the offer. They asked for a proposal. That night, I met Darren one last time. He texted, "You in? Coffee?" We met at a 24-hour diner near the docks, the kind of place our grandfather used to love. Greasy tables, perfect pancakes, and waitresses who remembered your name after one visit. He looked tired, really tired. "I didn't mean for it to go like this," he said quietly. "I know. I thought you'd always be in the background, holding things together, that I'd take us forward." "You didn't take us anywhere, Darren. You walked ahead without checking if anyone was following." He nodded slowly. "So what now? You take over? You run it all?" I looked at him for a long time. "No," I said. "I'm not taking over. I'm taking it back. The people, the values, the legacy. You can hate me for that, but it was never yours alone." He didn't argue. He just pushed his plate away and stood. "For what it's worth," he said, "you deserved the title long before I ever wore it." I didn't respond. Some things didn't need answering. The next morning, I met with my attorney, finalized the proposal, and submitted it to the board. By week's end, it was approved. Maddox and Company would merge with Ellington Maddox under a dual-brand transition. I would lead the new entity as managing director, with full control over restructuring, staff retention, and client relations. There were headlines, industry blogs, quiet congratulations from people who once called me too soft. I didn't care about any of it. What mattered most was the staff meeting I held the following Monday. I stood at the front of the room, same room Darren had fired me in, and looked out over a sea of faces I hadn't seen in months. "I'm not here to celebrate," I said. "I'm here to rebuild. With you." A murmur ran through the crowd. I know it's been broken, and I know who broke it. But more importantly, I know who held it together as long as they could. There were tears, and applause, and quiet smiles. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. 6 months after the merger, I walked through the newly redesigned Maddox and Company headquarters with a coffee in one hand and a hard hat in the other. The building was alive again. Voices carried from open-plan departments. Forklifts beeped rhythmically in the distance. There were new hires, returning veterans, and familiar faces I hadn't seen since the day I was fired. They didn't whisper anymore. They smiled, stopped me in hallways, asked questions, shared wins. And in return, I made one promise. No corner office, no closed doors. Leadership wouldn't be a title. It would be a presence. The new Maddox wasn't flashy, but it was resilient. We reinvested in employee training, reinstated full benefits, and launched a rotating leadership program to develop future managers from within. The company was finally becoming what it should have been all along. Not a dynasty of power, but a platform for people. That fall, I attended a logistics summit in Chicago. On the last evening, I was asked to speak on a panel titled Resilience in Legacy Businesses. When it was my turn, the moderator asked, "What's the most important lesson you've learned since taking over your family company?" I didn't hesitate. "Legacy isn't what you inherit," I said. "It's what you build when no one's watching." There was a long pause, followed by quiet applause. Not because it was a flashy answer, but because it was true. That winter, I received a letter from Darren. A real letter. Not an email. Not a text. It was short, handwritten in that stiff, overly neat way he always wrote when he was nervous. "Lily, I've taken a role with a nonprofit focused on mentorship for underprivileged youth. I'm learning how to listen. Finally, I just wanted to say thank you for holding the family together, even when I didn't deserve to be part of it." I folded the note carefully and placed it in the drawer of my desk, next to our grandfather's pocket watch and a photo of the original delivery truck, taken in 1959. Forgiveness, I was learning, didn't always need to be spoken aloud. Sometimes it was just a door you quietly left unlocked. In January, I visited our original warehouse in Everett again. This time, I wasn't alone. 24 employees, new recruits, and seasoned veterans stood with me on a bitter cold morning as we unveiled a small brass plaque bolted into the concrete outside loading dock 3. It read, "In memory of Harold Maddox, who taught us that the strongest parts of any company are the ones you can't see." Miguel wiped a tear from his cheek. He would have loved this. I nodded, running my gloved fingers over the engraved words. He would have hated the plaque, though. Said it was too fancy. Everyone laughed. That evening, back at home, I sat on my balcony overlooking the harbor. The same place I sat the morning after Darren fired me. The same view. But everything had changed. A soft knock came at the door. It was my niece and nephew, Darren's kids, holding a tray of homemade cookies and 2 mugs of cocoa. Their mom waited in the car, but they came bounding in like it was their second home. "Uncle Darren said you're the boss of everything now," Ava said proudly. I smiled. "Only the boring stuff." "Can we come see the trucks again sometime?" asked Jack, his eyes wide. "Of course," I said. "But only if you promise to wear a hard hat." They giggled. Family had become complicated, bruised, but not broken. I'd worked hard to keep the rift from extending to the next generation. Because if there's one thing this whole journey taught me, it's this. Power fades, titles change, but what we pass down, that shapes the future. As the sun dipped below the skyline, I looked out at the water one last time. Not for reflection, but for peace. Everything I had built, lost, and rebuilt again was rooted in a truth I now carried like armor. Success wasn't about proving someone wrong. It was about proving something right. That kindness wasn't weakness. That stability didn't need spotlight. That the quiet ones, the patient ones, could not only endure the storm, but build something better in its wake. And that foundations matter. Because anyone can sit in the biggest office, but only a few understand what holds the building up.